Thank you. Obrigado. So, bom dia. That is only one of three Brazilian phrases that I know. I'll use the second one that I know when I close. But I'm going to present to you in English today, so hopefully that's okay with you. So I think we've heard this morning that water is complex. Water in many ways is a pain in something. And if we think about water, 71% of the world is covered with water. 97% of it, unfortunately, is salt water, so it's not drinkable. Sometimes when water comes, it's too little. So we have too little water. It doesn't fall when we need it to fall. Sometimes we have too much water, and we experience flooding and other issues associated with water. Water knows no geopolitical boundaries. Its boundaries do not align with our political boundaries, so that can cause some issues and some tension across different governments and municipalities. Water only likes to go downhill, right? So if I wanted to supply power, I can easily provide a wire. But if I wanted to take this water and bring it up, I have to have a pump or require energy to bring water up. So in California, for example, they pump water as much as 600 meters to deliver water to Southern California. And that obviously has implications from an energy standpoint. Our bodies are comprised of 60% of water, and water is essential and is our most precious resource. So what I'm going to talk about today is some of the approach and the framework that we at Arq have developed so that globally we can apply the same process and same consistent procedure in our design on how we can deliver sustainable water management systems and look at green infrastructure and natural systems. So what I'm going to go through really is talk through three things. I'm going to go through drivers of change, go through what does it mean, what is this whole thing about design with water, and then I'll go through some case studies where we've applied this practice and this framework. So going through drivers of change first, I'm going to start first. We're talking about the future of urban water, but really I want to talk first about the past of urban water and the history of urban water. So this is a map. Anyone here, I don't know if anyone here is a GIS person, but this to me is the start of GIS mapping. This is a map produced in 1854. This was by a guy named John Snow in London. And what he was trying to map was outbreaks of cholera in London. And what he was trying to find, you can see the black bars there. And what it shows is where there were increased numbers of outbreaks resulting in deaths and all sorts of issues. And you can see the proximity of the bars with a pump. And what they found is that the water supply where they were taking it was adjacent to cesspools and other sanitation systems at the time in 1854, and that was contaminating the water supply that people were drinking. Why this is important is this resulted in the first ever sewer network that was designed by Sir James Bazalgette in London. I'm an engineer. He is my hero, okay? But a marvelous feat, right? In London, imagine late 19th century, the plan was let's put in these underground sewers where there's already a city in place. So an amazing feat. This was essentially the site plan, let's say, of the sewer network, and then you can see the treatment work. So this was a phenomenal achievement at the time, an engineering feat that would follow in terms of how other cities would develop. And this worked. This worked in Los Angeles. So this is a brief history of Los Angeles and the LA River. It used to be a natural path for water to make its way to the coast, and now it's evolved into something I think we've all seen, right? This either is used to convey water, or anyone here that watches blockbuster movies you'll also notice it for car chase scenes and helicopter chase scenes, right? So everyone needs to escape along the LA River. It doesn't get much more multiple functions out of this than just a concrete channel. So and that's sort of where we are today. And what are the big risks facing our world? If we think about some of the questions we have to ask ourselves, are our cities too big? Is our city in the right place? Are we adjacent to places of natural disaster? Can we survive without rain? I mean, we heard some of the issues this morning regarding that. How vulnerable are we? Are we susceptible to sea level rise? Do we mitigate? Do we adapt? All important questions as we face some major threats and climate change trends. The World Economic Forum in 2014 identified 10 global risks And if you look at 5 of them, they're all related to water. So number 3 is water crises. Number 5, failure of climate change mitigation and adaptation. We have greater incidence of extreme weather events and floods. I mean, we know from 1950 all the way up to 2000, the number of flooding events globally has increased by an order of magnitude. Food crises. Obviously, food is linked to water. We won't have food without water. And then potentially political and social instability. So again, that whole issue that water boundaries do not align with geopolitical boundaries. Climate change hazards, I think we're all familiar with this, but we're going to have regional water stress. Places are already experiencing this. We know this. Rising sea levels are already forcing communities to move and rethink how they're going to plan their communities over the next couple decades. Groundwater depletion is causing issues. Surface water flooding and drought. I mean, all of these things are going to get worse as climates change. Water scarcity, I think we know this as well. I mean, there are several regions regionally where there are water scarce. They don't have enough water to meet their needs. And then there are many other regions that are approaching water scarcity. And then the other trend, we have population growth, but we also have urbanization. So as of now, we have more people living in cities than we do in rural areas. So this means that we now have to manage all of the infrastructure that are within cities. And by 2045, we're going to have, it's projected that we'll have more than double the people will be living in cities than they will be in rural areas and environments. And all of this means, if we take the simple view that all of the water that's available in the world is in one tank, and all of that water is supplying industry, people, food, tomorrow or in the future, the water in that tank will be less because we have climate change, which is going to cause some stress and cause some issues with the available water. We're also going to have pollution. We have pollution from cities, from agriculture. That's going to also deplete the amount that's available in that tank. But we also have increasing prosperity. So we have GDPs, we have developing countries that are becoming developed. They're growing fast. They're increasing in their prosperity. This means also things like food habits are changing. So more and more people are eating meat. And as you don't know, meat requires more water than, say, other types of food that we currently eat. So there's all sorts of pressures that are going to happen across our system that we need to contend with. And then the other issue, and this is where we link issues with water related to urban planning. So if we look at the amount of open space in cities, the World Health Organization recommends 8 square meters per person. And we're showing 2 examples here of Shanghai and London where they actually exceed this, but there are other cities like Ho Chi Minh, like Los Angeles, many other cities that do not have the adequate open space that its residents desire. So what is design with water? So essentially it's placing water at the center of the urban design process. It is a utility. We need to have water. It needs to be delivered to us in a pipe. It needs to go into the ground and move away from us so that we don't have flooding. But how can we make it a central part of the urban design process so that we can make livable cities and create sustainable cities? We've created an innovative framework that looks at water supply, stormwater, flooding, looks at wastewater, and how we can integrate each of those different parts of the urban water cycle together. How can we leverage natural systems and ecosystem services? And if you can see where we've put the water cycle, we've put it across in the middle of looking at the economy, looking at place and community, looking at how we deal with climate change, how we promote health and well-being, the link between energy and carbon, creating habitat and acknowledging that there will be issues with food and agriculture. We developed this as part of the C40 Cities workshops and the Clinton Climate Initiative. And it's really a concept of water resilience and looking at blue and green thinking. Okay. And this is just a cross-section of like how we view it. So there's different parts of the city, there's different parts of water systems. How can we take a look at that and integrate that as part of the city? So looking at, for example, coastal defenses and how that can be not just an engineering function, but how that can also provide ecological function. Looking at the urban environment themselves and looking at how can we integrate landscaping and collaborate across multiple agencies to deal with water management, but also create places of a sense of place for communities and residents. So blue thinking, okay, working with the water cycle, using green and blue space. We need to capture, store, and release. These are sort of the technical things, but how do we design places that use water? How do we look at pools and ponds and lakes and streams and rivers? How do we make these assets as part of our cities? And then there's the man-made blue part, looking at reservoirs, looking at canals and swales, and the things that we build as engineers and architects. In terms of green thinking, again, working with that water cycle, looking at natural systems, leveraging trees and forests and landscape as part of that water cycle. And what does that mean, and what would that look like in cities? And here's what it looks like. So these are just some examples. These are natural systems that have multiple functions. These are examples across many different cities around the world. And I bet at first glance, if I didn't give a talk about water, you may just think I'm a landscape architect showing these images. But all of these systems have different types of functions in terms of water management. So some case studies. Songdo City is essentially a new city in South Korea. Anyone that's ever been to South Korea, it's about a painful 2-hour drive in traffic to get from the airport to Seoul. So it makes it challenging to create an international business hub, and it makes it difficult for folks that want to go to Seoul. So the premise behind Songdo City is that it is part of this movement of an aerotropolis, and it is a 10-minute drive from the international airport. So this it's built on reclaimed land. This is an image from about early 2000s. This is the master plan of the city. Notice the amount of green space that's planned in it. And then this is the city today. So within the span of 15 years, this city has risen in the Yellow Sea. One of the things about Songdo is that, again, for anyone that works in the built environment, this has the most certified green buildings in any city. So all of the buildings are built with sustainable practice. So in terms of water, if we look at just water, all of the buildings have a significant reduction in freshwater use, or water use, basically. So residential, it's able to achieve, all the buildings have 37% reduction in water, and that's compared to your standard building. And then commercial and mixed-use buildings, we see a 27% reduction in water use. And that's just through efficient fixtures and conservation techniques that have been applied. This is, again, a rendering of the city. Again, notice the green. There's 40% of the city is built with green space. And this has obviously a profound effect and impact to all the residents. This is a rendering of a mixed-use housing. It has office, it has retail, it has some housing above. You can see the blue and green. The blue is captured rainwater. So rainwater is captured, and that's used for the water features. The green, some of the green that you see there is used to help filter some of that stormwater that falls on the ground. This is called, I think they were trying to pull ideas when they built this city from other great cities, let's say. So one of the ideas was, let's make this a central park. So they called it Central Park. So you can see there, this is the main park in the heart of the city. You also notice a canal right through the middle of it. So that canal takes a nod from the great canals of Venice. But what's interesting is that beneath the park, there are a series of these underground storage cells that basically capture all of the rainwater that falls on the park. The canal is a central feature, and we said that in Seoul, where rainfall falls 3 months of the year, and the rest of the year is fully dry, we cannot create a canal that uses fresh water. So the canal is actually made of seawater, and we have engineered filtration systems to help clean it, but it's not as extensive and exhaustive as using fresh water. So by looking at this picture, this park on an average year doesn't require any fresh water. It's using either harvested rainwater or seawater to make its blue and green. Also within the city, there is a wastewater treatment system, there is a sewage network, but there's also a recycled water across the city. So there's a network of pipes across the city that delivers treated water back to the buildings and back to other features. And the central premise there is, why should we be using drinking water for flushing our toilets? And that results in the ability to create a golf course that uses this type of water. So again, rather than, we knew that they wanted a golf course, this is just part of the culture, but why create why create this golf course that requires an obscene amount of fresh water? In Wales, in the United Kingdom, one of the projects that I wanted to talk about was this Rainscape program. And what's relevant here and what's interesting here is the required collaboration across agencies. So if you look at 3 different agencies, we have the Cardiff Planning Authority here. They have certain goals and drivers, right? They want attractive urban landscape, they want health and well-being, they want safer public areas. We have the Parks and Natural Resources departments, and they want to create habitats, they want to create and promote biodiversity, they want to improve their quality. And then you have Welsh Water. They want to promote education, they want everyone to understand what the value of water is. And of course, they want to improve their water quality. So what we did was bring the 3 of those groups together and said, rather than spend, each of you, let's say, $1 to do this, $1 to do this, $1 to do this, why don't you just spend $1 to do all 3? So we have regeneration, we have green space and trees, and we have reconnecting people. And this is a collaborative model that we're seeing across other cities as well. And I'll talk more about that. And what that's resulted in is, from an engineering standpoint, we've identified over 180 possible areas in Wales. And this is one that was recently built. It's part of a school. It is a rain garden that is part of the playground. It provides an educational element so that everyone knows the value of water, but it also cleans that water. It provides the habitat creation that the Natural Resources Group wanted. It creates health, safe places and health, and provides health and well-being, which is what the city wanted. Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, so the Olympics are coming, right? This was a park that was built as part of the Olympic program in London. And since it was built, it's flooded 9 times. And that is not by accident, that's by design. We need green space, but we also need space to accommodate flooding. We know it's going to rain, we know it's going to flood, so how do we marry those 2 together? So there are intentional areas within this park that flood, and it's thriving even under those conditions. Some of you may have heard this. This is probably one of the more famous examples of stream restoration. This is the, I hope I don't butcher this, is the Cheongjicheong Stream Restoration Project in Seoul. So on the left is what used to be there. This is an elevated highway with roads and infrastructure beneath it. And on the right is what's there today, a stream that's been fully restored for what it used to be. Here's some images of the stream. This was an early rendering, and these are just some images. I mean, I love this image where it is a nod and an acknowledgement to what used to be there from the elevated highway. But the benefits of this project, yes, it's flood control, flood management project, so yes, it manages the 200-year flood, but it's increased biodiversity by over 639%. It has reduced air pollution within a 4 to 7 block radius by 35%. It has reduced urban heat island effect by as much as 5.9 degrees Celsius. It gets 64,000 visitors daily, and that equals a revenue of $1.9 million a day. Property values skyrocketed 30 to 50%, and they've attracted 3.5% more businesses than the rest of Seoul. In New York City, we've been involved a lot on this green infrastructure program that they're retrofitting throughout all parts of the city. But before I get into that, looking back at the history of New York City, so if we look back at 1974, which is here, all the way up to 1998, this represents a story of essentially what New York City has done in terms of implementing wastewater treatment upgrades. So New York City, like many older cities, has a combined sewer. Right? So when we flush our toilets, it all goes into one pipe. When it rains, it also goes into that same pipe. So these wastewater treatment plants are built to double the capacity of what they actually need so they can actually treat rain. And this is the same model across many cities. So what you see here is improvements to all the wastewater treatment plants. It's building these vast tunnels underneath the city that store this water temporarily so that it can then later be treated. But you can also see what's happened. So purple indicates a high amount of bacteria and fecal coliforms, and then yellow is very minimal amount. So you can see the transformative effect that all of that infrastructure has provided for New York City waterways. So now you fast forward to 2010, and New York City has decided, well, there is this movement towards green infrastructure. Is it cost beneficial for us to look at green infrastructure to complement the work that we're doing with gray infrastructure, tunnels and increased wastewater treatment plants? And what they found is yes. I mean, at this point, I'm going to give you the punchline, but they're investing $2 billion on green infrastructure. And what they found was, let's look at different opportunities within public right-of-way, public space, to incorporate green infrastructure. But what does that mean? The New York City Department of Environmental Protection manages water. They do not own or manage anything that you see in this image. So that means they have to collaborate with Department of Transportation, Department of City Planning, and Department of Parks in order to deliver something like this. So this is a rendering of one of the main program components that they're using is they call it a bioswale. You can see here stormwater runoff flows in. It gets treated by the plants. The plants are specific to help clean up the water. There's engineered soils and gravel media that helps to also treat that and clean that water that replenishes aquifers below, replenishes depleting groundwater. And then we also have evapotranspiration that happens through the trees and the plantings. This is an image of it in its constructed form. And if we look at the benefits of one bioswale, it can manage about 108,000 gallons per year. Sorry, that's in gallons. It can give about 0.69 jobs a year in terms of maintenance. There's savings of about $20 US dollars of treatment, so that we are no longer treating the water that goes into that bioswale with a wastewater treatment plant. Property value has the potential to go up by 9%. Urban heat island effect is reduced, and then there's a significant amount of carbon that gets reduced. That's one bioswale. So this is a map of New York City. I think hopefully you all recognize this. But what New York City is currently planning, designing, and constructing are 8,000 right-of-way bioswales. So that's just a map that just shows where they're currently planned, designed, and being constructed. And you look at those metrics again, and we're looking at over 618 million gallons managed, up to 4,000 jobs, and these are green-collar jobs. These are very low-tech type jobs. $112,000 in treatment savings. Again, that property value increase, a greater reduction in urban heat island effect, and then a lot more CO2 sequestered. And what's the community saying about it? So there's an article in the New York Times about a year ago. The gardens suddenly appeared in an industrial corridor. So if you remember back that map, there were a lot of dots in Brooklyn and Queens. There were not that many dots actually in Manhattan. So where this landscape is going is actually in many parts, it's prioritized by our watersheds and the watersheds that are most impaired. And where those happen to be are the most poor and underserved neighborhoods within New York City. So in many ways, it's getting an investment in some of those communities that would not have otherwise gotten this investment. There's a quote from a resident: if somebody comes down who doesn't live here, it makes our neighborhood, look better than it actually is. Okay? The hood is going green. And then from a technical standpoint, the potential to capture X amount of stormwater each year. So that's all leading to having cleaner waters along New York City. One of the projects that we've been involved in is called the Plus Pool. And the premise here is, how do we take the water from the East River, or from any river really in New York City, and have it filter through the walls so that we can create a recreational amenity for residents. And that's the premise, and there's ongoing research, and there's a lot of funding that's happening for this project. But what if, this is an example in Copenhagen, this is the Copenhagen Harbor Bath. This was built probably about 10 years ago, I think. And this is an amenity for the public where they can actually swim in the water. And this is because the water obviously is clean enough for the general public to go into this water. So what if you could swim in your waters? what would that mean for the city? Would that transform the city? Or is that too much of an ask? Maybe it's too much of an ask. What if you could just access it? Okay, so this is, again, this is in New York City. This is East River Esplanade. This was built over the last, it's been being built over the last 10 years. This is a project that would not have been possible 20 plus years ago because of the water quality. No one would have wanted it. But it's possible now because the water quality is there. People want to be by the water. As you saw in the previous slide, people want to go into the water. So there's a significant potential step change in how our cities can be. My second Brazilian phrase, obrigado.